Okay, next functionality will be some storing of keyframes. So when we draw something, we don't always want to slide through the whole animation manually, but we want to go to the beginning, hit, in this case, Shift S I'll pick for this, to store like a keyframe or a point of interest or a stage. Go to another interesting point, the end of first line, let's say. Again, hit Shift S to store a second keyframe or stage, and so on. So we can set some animation keyframes, let's say, in order to use our numeric keyboard, which I'll use to cycle through them, and instead of sliding through the whole thing, because then you can accidentally already reveal some part of the network while you only want to focus on a first line. Let's say, like if you're explaining something and you just want to explain the first line and you're already showing the next part, it can maybe be confusing. So that's the idea behind this functionality. Let's close this down. Let's take a keyboard in, configure it to activate itself on Shift S, so S and combined using Shift, so Shift S, and it will toggle itself to active. I want to store those keyframes in a simple table for now, but in order to do this, we need to bridge this gap with chop execute. I'll activate its toggle, go in, remove this text, off to on. We can say, let's rename it to stages, operator stages, append row, if I am not mistaken. And just row, I think, yes. So what do we want to add? We want to add this one over here, the mapped slider value, so null3. So okay, let's go in, operator null3, and we use its only and first and only channel. So when hitting Shift S, we see these stages or slider values are being stored. Now we only need to be able to clear them with all the rest of the clearing. So the clearing is happening over here when hitting Ctrl Shift W. We call this little piece of code as it's reacting to the KW key. So also at operator stages clear, dot clear, like this. And normally if we go check it out, Ctrl Shift and W, and it's cleared. So there you go. If I hit Shift S again, it will keep storing. Ctrl Shift W, it clears it out. So that's nice. Let's actually store some useful keys. So store the first one, the second one, third one, and last one. Okay. So now we need to use them to somehow cycle through this whole timeline. So first I want to convert back to the chop domain. So I have those values available in chop domain. For this, I just want, let's see, a channel per column maybe, and the first column are values as well. So now if we hit A and D to show the dots, I think, we actually see those table values as chop values. So now we can use those, or we should be able to use those. And for this, we might use a lookup again. So let's add a lookup. And these are the actual values we want to select. So it's not the index. Like if you hover over the first input, you'll see we need to provide an index, and these are the actual values that need to be selected based on this index. So this input we still need to provide, and for this I'll use another keyboard, but instead of using S, I'll use 4 and 6 on the numeric keypad, as they point to the left and to the right on my keyboard anyway. I don't need shift, so ignore. So if I hit 4 and 6, you'll see those channels activating. So when we hit those 4 and 6 keys, we want to increment or decrement a count or an index which we can provide to this lookup. So let's add a constant and fill this gap in between, so we can increment or decrement this constant based on those keys activating. So let's call this stage, and this one as well, and bridge this gap by using a chop execute. Remove this nonsense, activate off to on, so we can use this callback. Now I went to copy some code just to speed things a little up and to avoid some mistakes. But anyway, you can see that this code tells, like, if the channel name is K4, I'm hitting the key K4. If it's K6, I'm hitting key 6. So based on those keys, I want to increment this stage channel, but also I want to take into account the current stage value, so it doesn't go too low or too high. It's actually clipped or clamped between 1, you'll see. So if stage is 1, it will not execute this anymore, but if it's bigger than 1 still, you can still decrement it. Same is for let's see what we have here. Okay, here it's already a little spoiler. We will add this one as well. So after this one, we will also add a sort. What this does is this allows us to now also go back and save some intermediate keyframes as well. So I had a keyframe here, about here, here, and all the way at the end. But let's say I also want to store an intermediate keyframe still. Just hit Shift S again. You will see, oh, it was actually appended at the end, of course. But this sort chop nicely sorts it by increasing values. So, or stages or index cycles through them from low values to high values. So now this sort is in there. Let's rename it to just sort, so the names are matching. And then you can see that if we hit K4, it's bigger than 1, we're still allowed to decrement our stage channel. If we hit K6 and our stage is still smaller than the maximum number of channels or samples which sort is holding. So now sort is holding, let's visualize it, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 samples, but we subtract 1 to make it work actually. So if it's smaller or equal than 4, then we're still allowed to increment it, so it reaches 5 normally. Let's try it out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But if I keep hitting my 6 key, it stops there. If I go down, it's clamped between the values we actually need, because if we slide our value now, we see that it's actually going between 1 and 5 or 4. Yes, is it 4? Yes. Okay, yeah, it's going to 4, but of course we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 stages we stored. Therefore, we can cycle through all stages. So if we now connect this one, we can actually see nothing happening. So let's see. We should also set the range to the amount of samples that are present in the sort chop. So let's do this 0 to, no, it should be 1 to 5. Yes, that seems to be correct. So add all the way to the left. So I'm not able to go below 1. I'm reading out 1. The next is reading out the correct one. Next one, 3 point, is it correct? Let's see. Okay. So this one is the unsorted list, but one is reading out the 1. The next one is reading out 2.16. The next one is reading out actually the sorted value, so 2.59. Then we will read out 3.13, and then we end up with 4. So now we need to start using these values to cycle through this list to this slider range instead of the slider itself. So somehow we need to find a way to switch between the slider, using the slider, and actually using the keys. So again, let's use a switch for this. Switch, and this is the slider value, the manual way, and this is actually the automated, the key-based way. So these two need to be connected to the switch. So now we should be able to clean this up a bit, make this like this, make this like that. Connect this one now instead, because as you can see, all the lines that are, all the copies are using this one. And now we can actually switch between the, let's switch between 0 and 1. So now we are actually switching to the key-based progression through the animation. So if I now hit my 4 key, I can see that indeed I'm cycling through those animations. It's happening instantaneously, which is okay, but we can do better, I think. So therefore I'll just quickly add a lag chop to make it a bit more smooth. So now just by adding this lag, you'll see that you get a nice and smooth fade in, fade out, and you can tweak those lag values in order to make it faster or more responsive or slower. So if you make it 1 both, it will just go very gradually. And as the lines don't have enough points or details, you might see some stuttering. But let's leave them at 0.2, which looks fine. Let's also make it controllable from the panel itself. So for this, we might add a simple button. Here you go. We go take the output of the button, use it as a null, just place it down here. And now we can say if it's a toggle, yeah, that's look good. So now we can export this, let's see. Let's place it below the switch, as we want the button to control the switch. And there you go. Now the button is taking over. So if we use the button, you'll see I'm able to switch between the manual way or the key-based way using the keyframes. And let's give it some meaningful name. We go inside of the button. If I'm not mistaken, does it look like this? Text. That's something in, okay, that's in version 2022. Yeah, before it was a text shop, but now they're using a text comp apparently. So let's change this text. I already went to copy some little Python from the finished project. So what does it say? Staging, if output is 0, else perform. So this allows us to view some more details, which will become apparent when viewing this channel or this panel. So let's see, perform staging. So now it shows us that we are in staging, which is actually, or by this I mean staging, you can manually set the slider and start saving those keyframes or those stages. If you go click this one, it tells you you are in perform, and then you can use the keys in order to cycle through your performance or whatever. Yeah, that's it. Another thing we can do now is that when we go to perform mode, we could hide this slider entirely so that we really show like, okay, you're in perform mode, you shouldn't be using this slider anymore. So therefore you can just use this null one. Let's just go to panel and use those two. So let's do it this way. So when we are in perform mode, I'll just make this one a bit bigger as well. Both 50, maybe 75. No, let's keep it at 50 and just increase this one. So if we are in perform mode, if we are in perform mode, display is deactivated, enable is deactivated. If we are in staging mode, they're activated again, so we can do our staging, store the stages or the keyframes. If we go into perform, everything is nicely hidden and we can just use the keys on our numeric keypad.